These here are the upper control arm bushings. Come 4 in a set. Hard race hardened rubber. There's the part number, and we're going to be doing these first in the upper arms. Alright, so for the upper control arms we have a 1 3/8 inch socket on the bottom to allow the bushing to drop through that. It's just supporting the outer ring on this, and then pretty simple setup, and they go in pretty easy. We're going to start cranking down on this one. It's going to compress the rubber up top just a little bit to start, and then the bushing should start to slide right in nice and easy. Should be home. And now your upper control arm has both bushings in it. That's what they look like with the new hardened rubber hard race bushings. Same configuration as OEM. So the next step for the upper control arms is to press back your factory ball joint, and it's got a dot on the front there that's supposed to match up with the dot there on the control arm. So when you insert it, so those two should line up on top of each other when you go to press this in. The reason for that to be aligned is so the articulation in your ball joint is oriented correctly, so when your suspension moves back and forth you have the range you need, because it only goes back and forth that way just a tiny bit. So the setup to press the ball joint in, that's the head of the press there, the ball joint, and then we have a socket. Then the ball joint actually is going to go, the threaded part of the ball joint's longer than the socket, so these spacers here have a hole through the center, and you got to make sure you have a hole through the center of them, so when you push the ball joint in, you're not going to push the threaded end of the ball joint onto something to crush it. So we're going to crank down here. These seem to go pretty easy as well. And then it's seated. So at this part, the only thing left to do to the upper control arms to get them ready to go back in the car are to repack the ball joints with grease and reinstall your boot. And these are the factory boots. These weren't torn at all, so I just wiped out all the old grease of there, and we're going to apply new grease on the inside of the boot and apply grease down here in the ball and work it back and forth. So the next bushings we're going to be doing are the lower control arm bushings that adjust the camber. So these are the lower arm bushings. This is the number for it. So for this bushing, we're having it rest right on the platform on the table, and we have a 2-inch 3/4 drive socket on top, pushing it straight down, and just a little piece to flatten it out on top. You're almost there. Yep. So next we're going to be doing the shock bushings and lower control arms. There, right there's the part number for them. These don't have a flange on them to bottom out the bushing, so we're just going to have to look by eye to make sure it's centered in the control arm when pressing it in. So for the shock bushing press setup, we have a 1 3/8 inch socket on the bottom, and then on top, which is roughly almost the same diameter, we're going to push directly on the sleeve. It's a 1 1/16 inch socket, 3/4 inch drive. Of course we have our plate here keeping everything flat. We're going to go ahead and press it in. Alright, so the shock bushings are in. We did notice one thing though, that the shock bushing itself, the sleeve, is about 50/1000ths of an inch wider than the control arm. So you got to kind of judge it by eye when you're pressing them in, to not press that sleeve flush with the edge, because you'll have about 50/1000 sticking out the backside. So just eyeball it and get a roughly 25/1000 on each side sticking out to get it centered. These here are the last bushings we have to do on the lower control arms. Here's the part number for them. These are the caster adjustment bushings, the ones that the collars slide right through and they always seize together. The rubber actually goes all the way 360 degrees around the outside, which is not the same kind of design as OEM. These things will be much more resistant to the suspension arm moving up and down, since it doesn't have rubber missing at the top and bottom to allow only the sides to twist. So I'm kind of interested to see how that'll go back together in the car and how it's going to fight me when I try to bend the arm down. Alright, so for the compliance bushing, we are using a 1 7/8 inch 3/4 drive socket, And then we have a collar that's wider than the diameter of the bushing, of course, to support it. And then just a flat on top. We're going to go ahead and crank it down. On this side, you're going to want to bring it even to about the edge of the chamfer, because you're going to have about 100 thousandths of an inch sticking out on each side. So just a little more we're going to need. That would probably be close to being good right there. Alright, so all the control arms are done. They got all the new hard race hardened rubber bushings pressed into them. We repacked the ball joints with grease. We did that according to the Helm manual, the 2000 to 2003 Honda S2000 service manual. They're all powder coated and they all look brand new. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe, leave a comment, drop a like. I hope this was helpful to you guys if you want to take on this task yourself. This is definitely something you can do in a weekend in the garage if you have a press. And check the video description if you want to see any other part of the installation process or removing the arms from the car or any other part of the video series I'm making on this.